The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and jasmine through the open windows of the Seaside Haven Inn, mixing with the aroma of fresh coffee brewing in the lobby. I wiped down the mahogany reception desk for the third time that morning, my fingers trembling slightly as they had been for the past week, ever since the phone calls started. Anonymous. Persistent. Always at 3 a.m., just heavy breathing, and the distant sound of waves that made my blood run cold, because they sounded exactly like the waves outside my window. I adjusted my white cotton blouse, making sure the small silver cross my grandmother gave me was visible against my collarbone. Faith had always been my anchor, the thing that kept me grounded when my parents died in that car accident 5 years ago, leaving me this inn and a lifetime of questions. The cross caught the morning light streaming through the stained glass windows. I'd restored myself, casting small rainbows across the guest registry. Liliana, table 6 needs fresh towels, and the couple in room 12 wants recommendations for dinner. Maria, my only full-time employee, breezed past carrying a stack of linens that smelled of lavender and sunshine. She was 63, had worked here since before my parents bought the place, and treated me like the daughter she never had. "I'll handle it," I said, grateful for the distraction from the knot of anxiety that had taken up permanent residence in my stomach. Sunville was supposed to be peaceful, a beach town where the most exciting thing that happened was the annual sandcastle competition. But lately, something felt wrong. The same black SUV parked across the street 3 days in a row, the man in the expensive suit who checked in last week and never left his room, the way the local police chief suddenly stopped making eye contact when I filed a report about the calls. I grabbed the fresh towels and headed upstairs, my practical flat silent on the carpeted steps. The inn only had 15 rooms, small enough to manage alone when Maria had her days off, intimate enough that I knew most of our regular guests by name. The couple in room 12 were newlyweds from Boston, sweet and constantly giggling, reminding me of dreams I'd carefully packed away after Thomas left. 2 years engaged, and he'd walked out 3 months before the wedding, because, as he'd put it, "I can't compete with God for your attention, Lily." I knocked softly on their door, delivered the towels with a smile and my best dinner recommendations, then made my way back downstairs. The afternoon stretched ahead with its usual tasks, checking in the new arrival expected at 2, preparing the evening wine and cheese reception, updating the website with photos of the recent room renovations. Ordinary. Safe. Exactly how I liked it. Except nothing felt safe anymore. At 1:47 p.m., 13 minutes before the new guest was due to arrive, everything changed. The front door burst open with enough force to make the welcome bell clatter violently against the frame. A man stumbled in, his expensive charcoal suit torn at the shoulder, a thin line of blood trickling from a cut above his left eyebrow. But it wasn't the blood or the torn clothing that made my breath catch. It was his eyes, dark as espresso and burning with an intensity that seemed to pierce straight through me, assessing, calculating, demanding. "Lock the door," he commanded, his voice carrying a slight Italian accent that turned the words into something between an order and a promise. Now. I should have screamed, should have reached for the phone, should have done anything except what I did, which was move toward the door, as if pulled by invisible strings, and flip the deadbolt with shaking fingers. "Is anyone else here?" He was already moving past me, his steps predatory despite what looked like a limp favoring his right leg. Blood was seeping through his shirt, I realized with growing horror. This wasn't just a cut on his forehead. "My employee, in the laundry room. And guests, but they're out for the day." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "You're hurt. I should call—" "No police." He turned to face me fully, and I took an involuntary step back. He was tall, easily 6'2", with the kind of build that spoke of disciplined training rather than casual gym visits. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and there was a hardness to his features that suggested he was intimately familiar with violence. No hospital, no calls. Do you have a first aid kit? In the office. But what I need is for you to get the kit and keep your mouth shut. The words should have been offensive, but they were delivered with such matter-of-fact authority that I found myself nodding. And send your employee home. Tell her there's a gas leak. Tell her whatever you want, but get her out. Now. Some part of my brain, the part that had attended self-defense classes after my parents died, that triple-checked the locks every night, that had reported those phone calls to unhelpful police, screamed that I should run. But another part, deeper and harder to define, recognized something in this man's eyes. Not kindness, but a strange sort of honor. He wasn't here to hurt me. He was here because he had nowhere else to go. Wait here, I heard myself say, then immediately felt foolish, as if this man would take orders from me. But he simply nodded once, sinking into one of the lobby's antique chairs with a barely suppressed grimace. 5 minutes, little saint. His eyes had found my cross. Then I need you to help me, and I need you to trust me. I hurried to the back office, grabbed the industrial-sized first aid kit I kept for guest emergencies, then detoured to the laundry room where Maria was folding sheets with practiced efficiency. Maria, I need you to leave early today. She looked up, concern immediate in her weathered face. What's wrong, mija? You look pale. Gas leak. The company called. They need to come check the lines. Safety precaution. The lie tasted bitter, but I forced a reassuring smile. Take tomorrow off too. Paid. Please. Maria knew me well enough to recognize when I wasn't telling the whole truth, but she also knew when not to push. You call me if you need anything. Anything. She squeezed my hand before gathering her things and leaving through the back door. When I returned to the lobby, my mysterious guest had moved to the window, his back to me as he surveyed the street with the focus of someone expecting danger. The blood on his shirt had spread, a dark stain that made my stomach clench with worry, despite every logical reason I had to be afraid of this man. They followed you, I said, not quite a question. They tried. He turned, and something flickered in those dark eyes. Approval, maybe. Or surprise that I'd grasped the situation so quickly. I lost them 3 blocks away, but they'll be checking hotels, inns, anywhere someone might seek shelter. Your inn is small enough to have escaped their initial notice, but that won't last. Who's they? I set the first aid kit on the coffee table, my hands surprisingly steady despite the surreal nature of this conversation. Business rivals who made a very poor decision about where to plant a car bomb. He shrugged out of his suit jacket, revealing a blood-soaked white dress shirt. I survived. They're not happy about that. Car bomb. The words hung in the air between us, competing with the cheerful sound of wind chimes on the front porch and the distant laughter of beachgoers. This was Sunville. Things like car bombs didn't happen here. Except apparently they did. Take off your shirt, I said, opening the first aid kit with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent summers volunteering at the church medical clinic. And tell me your name. Vittorio. He began unbuttoning his shirt, each movement deliberate despite what had to be significant pain. Vittorio Salvatore. And you are? Liliana Flores. This is my inn. I watched him peel the shirt away, revealing a muscled torso marked with what looked like superficial cuts from glass, probably from the car bomb he'd mentioned so casually. But there was also an older scar, surgical and precise, running down the center of his chest. Recent, maybe 6 months old, still slightly pink against his olive skin. Heart surgery, he said, catching my gaze. Cancer. They gave me 6 months to live 2 years ago. A slight smile, devoid of humor. I made them regret their prognosis. I should have been more shocked, should have asked more questions. Instead, I found myself cleaning his wounds with gentle efficiency, my fingers steady as they moved across his skin. The cuts were superficial, as I'd thought, nothing requiring stitches. But he'd been lucky, a few inches different, and we'd be having a very different conversation. "You're good at this," he observed, watching my face rather than my hands. "My grandmother was a nurse. She taught me before she died." I applied antibiotic ointment with careful precision, said knowledge was power, and knowing how to heal was the most important power of all. "Wise woman." His voice had softened fractionally. She would be proud of her granddaughter, taking in wounded strangers without calling the police. I haven't decided not to call them yet. I met his eyes, surprised by my own boldness. You could be a criminal, a murderer. I could be harboring someone dangerous. You are harboring someone dangerous. No denial, just simple truth. I'm the head of the Salvatore family, Liliana. Does that name mean anything to you? It did. Even in sleepy Sunville, people whispered about the Italian families that controlled everything from shipping to politics in the northeastern corridor. The Salvatores were one of the most powerful, their reach extending into places most people didn't want to acknowledge existed. "Mafia," I whispered, the word catching in my throat. "Business, politics, protection," he corrected gently. "Survival in a world that respects only power. But yes, if you need to simplify it, Mafia works." I should have run then. Should have locked myself in the office and called the police. Consequences be damned. Instead, I found myself finishing my work, bandaging the worst of the cuts with steady hands while my mind reeled with the implications of what I'd just learned. "Why did you come here?" I asked finally, stepping back to assess my handiwork. "To my inn, specifically?" "Fate." The word was delivered with such conviction that I looked up sharply. Or Providence, if you prefer. I was 2 blocks away when the bomb detonated. I ran, and your inn was the first place that felt. He paused, searching for the word. "Safe." "Safe." I laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. "You brought a war to my doorstep and call it safe?" "I brought myself to the only place in this corrupted city that still smells of jasmine and faith." His hand moved, catching my wrist with surprising gentleness. "Look at me, Liliana." I did, drawn by the command in his voice despite every instinct screaming otherwise. "I will protect you," he said, each word weighted with promise. "Whatever comes next, whatever consequences arise from my presence here, I will keep you safe. You have my word." The word of a Mafia boss. I should have sounded mocking, but it came out merely curious. The word of a man who survived death twice and decided that honor, real honor, matters more than power. He released my wrist, leaving behind the ghost of warmth. "I won't lie to you, little saint. I'm dangerous. My presence here puts you at risk. But turning me away puts you at even greater risk now that you've seen me, treated me, know who I am. So I'm asking, not demanding, for your help. Let me stay until nightfall. Let me make some calls and arrange safe transport. Then I'll disappear from your life as quickly as I entered it." His logic was sound, even as it trapped me. He was right that sending him away now, after everything I'd learned, might paint a target on my back regardless. And despite everything, despite the danger and the fear and the absolute insanity of this situation, I believed him when he said he'd protect me. One night, I heard myself agree. "You can stay in room 15, the corner room with its own entrance. No other guests will see you. But tomorrow, before dawn, you leave." Agreed. He stood, wincing slightly, and I instinctively moved to help steady him. His arm came around my shoulders, heavy and warm, and for just a moment, I let myself imagine what it might feel like to be protected by someone this powerful, this certain of his own strength. Then reality reasserted itself, and I stepped away, my cheeks flushing with embarrassment at my own thoughts. "This way," I said, leading him toward the back stairs that would take us to room 15 without passing through the main lobby. "And Mr. Salvatore?" "Vittorio," he corrected. "Vittorio," I amended, the name feeling strange and intimate on my tongue. "Whatever you need to do, whoever you need to call, please don't bring more violence to this place. This inn is all I have left of my family. It's sacred to me." Something shifted in his expression, a softening that made him look younger, more human, less like the dangerous criminal he'd admitted to being. "I understand sacred things, Liliana," he said quietly, "and I will honor yours as I would my own." It was only later, after I'd settled him in room 15 and watched him make hushed phone calls in rapid Italian, after I'd locked myself in my office and finally allowed my hands to shake, that I realized the truth. Vittorio Salvatore had walked into my inn seeking sanctuary, and I'd given it to him without hesitation. I'd crossed a line I didn't even know existed, stepped into a world I'd spent my entire life avoiding. And somehow, impossibly, it felt like the most honest thing I'd done in years. The phone rang at exactly 3 a.m., as it had every night for the past week. But this time, when I answered with trembling fingers, the heavy breathing was replaced by a voice. "We know he's there, Miss Flores, and we're coming for him. What happens to you depends entirely on how cooperative you decide to be." The line went dead, leaving me clutching the phone in the darkness of my bedroom, my heart hammering against my ribs. Downstairs, in room 15, Vittorio Salvatore slept in my sacred space, protected by nothing but my word and my foolish choice to trust a stranger. And somewhere in the night, danger was circling closer, drawn by the scent of jasmine and faith, and the one thing I'd always believed would keep me safe, my unwavering conviction that good could triumph over evil. I was about to learn how wrong I'd been. I didn't sleep after the phone call. How could I, knowing that whoever had been terrorizing me for the past week now knew exactly where Vittorio was? I sat in my bedroom with the lights off, watching the street below through a gap in the curtains, my rosary beads wrapped so tightly around my fingers that they left marks on my palm. At 4:47 a.m., 3 black SUVs pulled up across the street, their engines idling like patient predators. No one emerged. They simply waited, and somehow that was more terrifying than any overt threat could have been. I recognized one of the vehicles, the same one that had been parked there for 3 days. They hadn't been watching for Vittorio. They'd been watching me. The realization hit like ice water. This wasn't new. Whatever I'd stumbled into by helping Vittorio, I'd already been part of it before he ever walked through my door. The phone calls, the surveillance, the police chief's sudden distance. It had all been leading to this moment. I dressed quickly in jeans and a simple blue sweater, my fingers fumbling with the buttons as exhaustion and adrenaline fought for dominance. The cross around my neck felt heavier than usual, a reminder of faith that suddenly seemed inadequate against the reality unfolding outside my window. Room 15 was at the end of the hall, its private entrance exactly as I'd described. I knocked softly, 3 quick taps, then waited. The door opened within seconds, and Vittorio stood there fully dressed in fresh clothes that definitely hadn't come from my inn. His dark hair was still damp from a shower I hadn't heard, and the bandages I'd applied were gone, replaced with smaller, more professional dressings that spoke of someone with medical training having visited during the night. "You have people here," I said. Not quite a question. "I have people everywhere, little saint." He stepped aside, allowing me entry. The room was immaculate, as though he'd never been there at all, except for the faint scent of his cologne. Something expensive with notes of bergamot and cedar, including the very capable doctor who arrived through the window at midnight to properly tend to wounds you so admirably stabilized, There are 3 SUVs outside. I moved to the window, but his hand on my shoulder stopped me before I could look out. I know. They arrived 23 minutes ago. My men have been watching them watch the inn. His voice was calm, almost conversational, as though discussing something as mundane as the weather. They're Castellano's people. Marco Castellano, to be specific. A rival who's been trying to absorb my territory for the past 2 years. They called me at 3 this morning. Said they knew you were here. I turned to face him, anger finally breaking through the fear. They've been calling me every night for a week, Vittorio. A week, before you ever showed up. Which means this isn't about you seeking random sanctuary. This is about me, about my inn. What aren't you telling me? Something flickered in his dark eyes. Approval mixed with what might have been regret. He moved to the small desk, pulling out a tablet I definitely hadn't provided, and pulled up a series of photographs. My stomach dropped as I recognized myself in each one. Leaving the church after Sunday Mass, shopping at the farmer's market, locking up the inn late at night. Weeks of surveillance, methodical and thorough. Marco Castellano has been watching you for 3 months, Vittorio said quietly. Ever since his financial analyst discovered something interesting about the Seaside Haven Inn. Do you know what the land underneath this building is worth, Liliana? I shook my head, unable to find words. $17 million. The city council has been quietly negotiating with developers to build a luxury resort complex along this stretch of beach. Your inn sits on the most valuable parcel. The only parcel not yet sold or seized through various legal maneuvers. He swiped to another image, this one showing the police chief shaking hands with a man I didn't recognize. Castellano has been positioning himself to acquire it. The phone calls were meant to soften you up, make you scared enough to accept his eventual offer to buy you out at a fraction of its worth. But I never got an offer. My voice sounded distant, detached. Because I intervened. Vittorio closed the tablet, his jaw tight. 2 weeks ago, I discovered Castellano's plan. I had my lawyers file an injunction blocking any forced sales in this district. I also made it clear through certain channels that the Seaside Haven Inn was under Salvatore protection. The implications crashed over me like a wave. You made me a target. I made you untouchable, he corrected, but there was no triumph in his voice. Or so I thought. Yesterday's car bomb was Castellano's response. He knew I'd been to Sunville, knew I'd taken an interest in this property. Killing me would remove the protection and send a message to anyone else who might interfere with his plans. And I just happened to be the place you ran to for help. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. Not coincidence. Strategy. He moved closer, and I found myself backing up until my shoulders hit the wall. He stopped just short of crowding me, his hands braced on either side of my head in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. I came here because you needed protection whether you knew it or not. Because Castellano's next move would have been to force your hand through more direct means. Because fate, or providence, or whatever you want to call it, decided that you and I were meant to be in each other's lives, and I'm not a man who argues with destiny. That's insane. But my voice wavered, betrayed by the part of me that had felt that same inexplicable pull when he'd first stumbled through my door. Is it? His hand moved, not touching me but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his palm. Tell me you didn't feel it, Liliana. That moment when I walked in, and you looked at me, really looked at me, and something in you recognized something in me. Tell me it was just fear, or adrenaline, or Christian charity. I couldn't. Because he was right. There had been something, some recognition that went deeper than logic or reason. Something that made me help a stranger, lie to Maria, protect a man I knew was dangerous. What happens now? I asked instead of answering his challenge. Now you let me protect you properly. He stepped back, giving me space to breathe. My men are already in position around the inn. Castellanos' people won't make a move while they're outnumbered. But this standoff can't last indefinitely. So what? I just wait here like bait while you and this Castellano play chess with my life? You come with me. The words were delivered with absolute certainty. To my estate outside the city where security is absolute and Castellano can't touch you. Where you'll be safe while I handle this situation permanently. I'm not leaving my inn. The refusal was automatic, born of the same stubborn independence that had kept me going after my parents died, after Thomas left, after every loss and disappointment life had thrown at me. Liliana. My name in his mouth sounded like a prayer and a command. They will burn this place to the ground with you in it, if that's what it takes to get what they want. Your faith is admirable, but it won't stop a bullet or a firebomb. Then call the police, the FBI, someone who operates within the law. His laugh was sharp, devoid of humor. The police chief is in Castellano's pocket. The FBI is investigating 3 different cases against my organization and would be delighted to let a rival eliminate me. The law, as you understand it, doesn't exist in the world I inhabit. There's only power and the will to use it. I wanted to argue, wanted to cling to my faith in justice and order and the fundamental goodness of human institutions. But I'd seen the police chief's eyes slide away from mine when I'd reported the calls. I'd felt the weight of surveillance these past months. I'd heard the threat in that voice at 3 a.m. How long? I asked quietly. How long what? How long would I have to stay at your estate? Until it's safe. He moved to the window, carefully pulling back the curtain to survey the street. Could be days, could be weeks. Castellano is stubborn, and this has become about more than just your property. It's about respect, about who controls this territory. I won't ask you to disappear forever, Liliana. Just long enough for me to remind him why challenging the Salvatore family is a fatal mistake. Without killing him. I needed that promise. Needed some line that wouldn't be crossed. Vittorio turned, and I saw something dangerous flash in his dark eyes. I won't make promises I can't keep. If Castellano pushes this to its inevitable conclusion, I will end him. But I'll try other methods first for your sake. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was honest. More honest than Thomas had ever been. More honest than the police chief pretending he could help. More honest than my own assurances to myself that everything would be fine if I just kept my head down and prayed hard enough. I need to call Maria, tell her the inn is closing temporarily. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant and mechanical, as though someone else was making these decisions. Already handled. He pulled out his phone, showing me a text message. She received a generous bonus this morning and notification that the inn would be closed for renovations for the next month. Paid leave, full salary. She's already posted about her unexpected vacation on social media. The efficiency with which he dismantled my life was both impressive and terrifying. You can't just make decisions for me. I can, and I did. Because every minute we debate this is another minute Castellano's men sit outside planning their next move. He pocketed the phone, his expression softening fractionally. I'm not your enemy, Liliana. I know this feels like I'm taking away your choices, but I'm actually giving you the only choice that matters. Survival. A knock on the window made us both turn. A man I didn't recognize stood on the small balcony outside, his face professionally blank. Vittorio moved with fluid grace, opening the window to allow the man entry. Boss, we have a problem. The man's accent was pure Brooklyn, his eyes constantly scanning the room before settling on me with undisguised curiosity. Castellano just got reinforcements, 2 more vehicles, and they're not just sitting anymore. They're positioning for something. How long? My guess? They're waiting for daylight, full visibility. Maybe an hour, 90 minutes tops. Vittorio nodded, dismissing the man with a gesture before turning back to me. Decision time, little saint. You can stay here and trust that my men can protect this building when Castellano makes his move. Or you can trust me and leave now. before the situation escalates. Some choice. But even as I said it, I was moving toward the door, my mind already cataloging what I needed to grab from my private quarters. Give me 15 minutes to pack essentials. You have 10. Not negotiable, just fact. And Liliana? Whatever you're thinking about bringing, cut it in half. We're traveling light and fast. I made it in 8 minutes, shoving clothes, documents, and my grandmother's photo album into a single duffel bag. The cross stayed around my neck, my rosary beads went into my pocket, and my father's watch went onto my wrist. Everything else, all the accumulated possessions of 26 years, would have to stay behind. When I emerged, Vittorio was waiting with 2 men I hadn't seen before, both armed with guns they didn't bother to conceal. The casual visibility of the weapons drove home the reality more than anything else could have. This was actually happening. I was actually leaving my home under armed escort to stay with a Mafia boss. The garage, Vittorio said, leading me toward the back of the inn. We have a car waiting. They're watching the front, so we go out the back and through the service alley. But as we reached the garage door, the sound of breaking glass echoed from the front of the inn, followed by shouting in Italian I couldn't quite make out. Vittorio's hand found mine, his grip firm and strangely reassuring. Change of plans, he said calmly, though I could see the tension in his shoulders. We run. Running had never been part of my skill set. My life had been built on stillness, on routine, on the predictable rhythm of morning prayers and afternoon check-ins and evening reconciliations of the inn's books. But now I was sprinting through the service alley behind the seaside haven, my duffel bag bouncing against my hip. Vittorio's hand locked around mine like iron, and the sound of gunfire cracking through the peaceful morning air of Sunville. Keep your head down, Vittorio commanded, pulling me behind a dumpster as a bullet pinged off the brick wall where my head had been seconds before. And for God's sake, stop looking back. But I couldn't help it. I looked back and saw my inn, my sanctuary with smoke beginning to billow from a second-story window. They were burning it. Actually burning the only home I had left in this world. My inn, I gasped, trying to pull free from Vittorio's grip. They're destroying it. They're creating a distraction. His voice was hard, clinical, even as his body shielded mine from the direction of the gunfire. Which means we move now while they think we're trapped inside. A black Mercedes SUV screeched around the corner, its door already flying open before it fully stopped. The driver was a woman I hadn't expected, elegant in her efficiency, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes cold and professional as they assessed the situation. Get in, boss. We have maybe 60 seconds before they realize you're not in the building. I was pushed, not roughly, but with undeniable urgency, into the back seat. Vittorio slid in beside me, and before my seatbelt was even fastened, we were moving, the Mercedes accelerating with enough force to press me back against the leather seats. Status Gabriella, Vittorio said, his tone shifting into something harder, more commanding. This was the Mafia boss I'd only glimpsed, the man who controlled an empire through fear and calculated violence. Castellano has 12 men on the property, 4 more in reserve. They used incendiary devices on the second floor, standard intimidation tactics. Our people returned fire to create an exit corridor for you. Gabriella navigated through residential streets with the precision of someone intimately familiar with every back road in Sunville. No casualties on our side. Can't speak for theirs. Good. No emotion, just acceptance of facts. And the secondary location? Compromised. Castellano's reach is broader than we estimated. I'm taking you directly to the estate. ETA 90 minutes if we're not followed. 2 hours if we need to run countermeasures. I sat in silence, watching my town blur past through tinted windows, my mind struggling to process the past 24 hours. Yesterday morning, I'd been worried about positive reviews on TripAdvisor and whether the new organic coffee supplier was worth the extra cost. Now I was fleeing an assassination attempt in a vehicle that probably cost more than my entire year's revenue, next to a man who spoke about casualties and countermeasures like they were weather patterns. Liliana. Vittorio's hand found mine again, his thumb tracing small circles on my palm, in a gesture that seemed at odds with the cold efficiency he'd just displayed. Breathe. You're hyperventilating. I was. The edges of my vision had started to blur, my chest tight with panic I'd been suppressing since the first gunshot. I focused on his voice, on the warmth of his hand, on the steady rhythm he was tapping against my skin. Gradually, my breathing steadied. My grandmother's china was in that inn, I said quietly, surprised by what grief chose to surface first. She brought it from Cuba when she immigrated. It was supposed to be for my wedding. Then I'll find you china twice as beautiful. Not empty comfort, but statement of fact. Gabriella, make a note. I want a full replacement of everything lost in the fire. Antique dealers, estate sales, whatever it takes to match or exceed the quality of what was destroyed. Already on it, boss. Gabriella's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, something almost like sympathy flickering there before her professional mask returned. I'll need an inventory list when Miss Flores is feeling up to it. I didn't ask you to replace anything, I said, anger finally breaking through the shock. I didn't ask for any of this. Yesterday I was fine. My life was simple and quiet and mine. Now it's gone because you decided to use my inn as some kind of chess piece in your power games. You were never fine. Vittorio's voice was gentle but implacable. You were being stalked and terrorized and slowly cornered by a predator who would have taken everything from you regardless of my involvement. I didn't create this situation, Liliana. I just made you aware of it. You made it worse. My voice rose despite my best efforts to maintain composure. If you hadn't interfered, maybe Castellano would have just bought me out. Maybe I could have taken the money and started over somewhere else. You'd be dead within 6 months. The blunt delivery made me flinch. Castellano doesn't leave loose ends, and you would have been the person who could testify about how your property was acquired through intimidation. He would have offered you money, waited until the sale cleared, then arranged an accident. A gas leak, perhaps. Or a tragic car collision. Something that wouldn't raise too many questions in a town where he controls the police. I wanted to deny it, to cling to my faith in human decency and the rule of law. But I'd seen the police chief's evasion, heard the threat in that 3 a.m. phone call, felt the weight of being watched and hunted for months. Vittorio wasn't lying. He was just saying aloud what some part of me had already known. So, what am I now? I asked, exhaustion seeping into my voice. Your prisoner? Your responsibility? What exactly is my role in whatever comes next? My guest? He released my hand, and I felt the absence of warmth like a physical loss. For however long it takes to neutralize the threat Castellano poses. After that, you're free to return to Sunville, rebuild your inn, live whatever life you choose. And you'll just let me go? After everything I've seen, everything I know about you. His smile was sharp enough to cut. I'm not the monster you're painting me as, little saint. I don't keep people against their will. I protect what's mine until it's safe, then I let it go. A pause. Unless it chooses to stay. The implication hung in the air between us, weighted with meaning I wasn't ready to examine. I turned to look out the window, watching as beach gave way to highway, highway gave way to countryside, the landscape transforming from familiar to foreign with each passing mile. We drove in silence for nearly an hour before Gabriella spoke again. Boss, we have a tail. Gray sedan, 3 cars back. Been with us since we left the city limits. I felt Vittorio tense beside me, though his face remained calm. Castellanos or someone else's? Can't tell yet. Want me to lose them or identify them? Identify first. If they're hostile, then lose them. If they're federal, We lead them in circles until they get bored. He pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. I'm sending Marco to run the plates. ETA on that information is 5 minutes. The casualness with which he discussed evading federal authorities should have shocked me. Instead, I found myself fascinated by the machinery of his world, the networks and protocols and contingencies he'd built to protect himself and those under his protection. Tell me about the scar, I said suddenly, needing to think about anything other than the possibility of another attack. On your chest. You said cancer? Vittorio looked at me for a long moment, as though deciding how much truth to share. Lymphoma. Diagnosed 18 months ago, stage 3. The doctors gave me 6 months, maybe a year with aggressive treatment. His hand moved unconsciously to his chest, tracing the line of the scar through his shirt. I underwent surgery, chemotherapy, experimental treatments that nearly killed me faster than the disease. But I survived, because I refused to let cancer be what ended me. And after you survived? I prompted, hearing something in his voice that suggested the story wasn't finished. After I survived, I made a decision. He turned to face me fully, his dark eyes intense. I'd spent my entire life building power, accumulating wealth, maintaining control. I'd sacrificed relationships, happiness, anything that might be perceived as weakness. And when I was lying in that hospital bed, thinking I was going to die, I realized I had nothing. No one who loved me for myself rather than my position. No legacy beyond fear and money. Nothing that would matter in those final moments. So you changed, I said, beginning to understand. So I decided to live differently for whatever time I had left. His smile was bitter. I started taking risks I'd never allowed myself before. Pursuing pleasures I'd denied. Making decisions based on what I wanted rather than what was strategic. The old Vittorio Salvatore would never have interfered with Castellano's plans for your inn. It wasn't my territory, wasn't my concern. But the man I became after facing death, he saw an injustice and decided to act. Even knowing it might start a war. Especially knowing it might start a war. He leaned back, his shoulder brushing mine in the close confines of the SUV, because I'd rather die fighting for something that matters than live safely doing nothing. And I matter? The question escaped before I could stop it. You matter more than you know. His hand found mine again, and this time I didn't pull away. From the moment I first saw the surveillance photos of you, 3 months ago when I discovered Castellano's plan, something in me recognized something in you. You were this small point of light in a very dark world. Someone who'd built something beautiful and good from tragedy and loss. Protecting you became important in a way I can't fully explain. That's not protection, Vittorio. That's obsession. Perhaps he didn't deny it. But it's honest obsession. I won't lie to you and say my interest is purely altruistic. I want you safe, because I've become invested in your safety. I want Castellano destroyed, because he threatened what I've decided belongs under my protection. Is that selfish? Absolutely. But it's also the truth. The gray sedan was still following us. I could see it in the side mirror, maintaining a careful distance but never dropping back. Gabriella had changed lanes twice, taken an unexpected exit, and still it remained, patient and persistent. Federal plates, she announced, reading something on her phone. FBI, Organized Crime Division. They're not attacking, just watching. Let them watch. Vittorio's voice was dismissive. They have nothing on this vehicle, nothing connecting it to anything illegal. We're just a businessman and his guest taking a drive in the countryside. What about the shootout at the inn? I asked. Won't they investigate that? They'll investigate, Gabriella answered before Vittorio could. They'll find a property dispute between rival criminal organizations, no clear evidence of who started it, and a small-town police force happy to label it gang violence and move on. By tomorrow, it'll be a footnote in their ongoing surveillance of both families. The casual dismissal of justice made something in my chest tighten. This was the world Vittorio inhabited, where laws were suggestions and consequences were for other people. Where violence could be written off as business disputes, and federal agents could watch crimes unfold without intervening. "I want to go back," I said quietly. "Not to the inn, but to my life. To believing that good and evil are clear, that justice exists, that faith is enough to keep you safe." "I know." Vittorio's voice was unexpectedly gentle. "And I'm sorry that I'm the one who destroyed that innocence. But Liliana, you can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknown what you know. The only way forward is through, and I promise to guide you through as safely as possible." "And then what? You said I'd be free to go after Castellano is handled. Do you actually believe I can just return to normal life after this?" "No." His honesty was brutal. "I believe your normal is gone forever, but you can build a new normal, one where you're aware of the darkness but choose to live in the light anyway. One where you know monsters exist, but refuse to become one. That choice is still yours, little saint. I may have dragged you into my world, but I won't force you to stay in it." The estate appeared as we crested a hill, sprawling across manicured grounds that seemed to stretch forever. It was beautiful in a severe way, all stone and glass and careful architecture, surrounded by walls that managed to look elegant while being obviously defensive. Guards in expensive suits stood at regular intervals, their weapons concealed but undoubtedly present. "Welcome to Salvatore House," Vittorio said, as the gates opened automatically at our approach. "Your sanctuary, for however long you need it." Sanctuary. The word felt wrong. This wasn't a sanctuary. It was a fortress, designed to keep the world out and its inhabitants in. But as we drove through those gates and they closed behind us with a definitive click, I realized something that made my breath catch. For the first time since those phone calls started a week ago, I felt safe, and that terrified me more than anything else that had happened in the past 24 hours. Because feeling safe in the home of a Mafia boss meant I was already compromised, already changing, already becoming someone I didn't recognize. The question was whether I had the strength to fight that change, or whether I was already too far gone to turn back. The room they gave me was larger than my entire private quarters at the inn. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens that probably required a full-time staff to maintain. Silk curtains in shades of cream and gold framed the view, and the bed looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel rather than a guest room. Everything was beautiful, expensive, and utterly impersonal. "The closet is fully stocked," Gabriella said, opening double doors to reveal more clothing than I'd owned in my entire life. "Mr. Salvatore had his personal shopper select items in your size. If anything doesn't fit or isn't to your taste, let me know and we'll arrange replacements." I stared at the rows of designer dresses, tailored pants, silk blouses, all with tags still attached. How did he know my size? "Mr. Salvatore is very thorough." Her expression remained professionally neutral. "Bathroom is through there, fully stocked as well. House rules are simple. You're free to move anywhere on the ground floor and in the gardens during daylight hours. Second and third floors are private, off limits without escort. Kitchen staff will prepare whatever you'd like, just use the intercom. Security is for your protection, not restriction, but please don't attempt to leave the grounds without notifying someone first. So I'm a prisoner with nice amenities." I hadn't meant to say it aloud. Gabriella's mask slipped slightly, something almost sympathetic crossing her features. "You're a protected guest in a dangerous situation, Miss Flores. There's a difference." After she left, I sank onto the edge of that enormous bed and finally allowed myself to cry. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet tears for everything I'd lost in less than 24 hours. My inn, my independence, my carefully constructed life. The illusion that faith and goodness were enough to keep darkness at bay. I cried until there were no tears left. then washed my face in a bathroom that featured heated floors and a shower with more jets than I could count. The clothing fit perfectly, which somehow made everything worse. Vittorio had been watching me long enough to know my exact measurements, to understand my style preferences, to predict what I might need. It was thoughtful and invasive in equal measure. I changed into soft gray pants and a cream sweater, both ridiculously expensive based on the labels I didn't recognize, and forced myself to explore. Staying in that beautiful prison of a room would only make the walls close in faster. The ground floor of Salvatore House was exactly what I expected. Impeccable taste, combined with obvious wealth. Original artwork lined the hallways, sculptures that probably belonged in museums sat on pedestals like casual decorations, and every piece of furniture looked both priceless and uncomfortable. It was a house designed to impress rather than to live in. I found Vittorio in what Gabriella had called the library, though calling it a library was like calling the ocean a puddle. 3 walls of books reached from floor to ceiling, accessible by one of those rolling ladders I'd only seen in movies. The 4th wall was entirely glass, overlooking the gardens where the afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold. He sat in a leather chair near the window, reading something on a tablet, a crystal glass of amber liquid on the table beside him. He'd changed as well, now wearing black pants and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms that were more muscular than his suit suggested. The bandages were gone, the cuts from yesterday's explosion already healing with the efficiency of someone whose body was used to recovering from damage. "You don't have to hover in the doorway, Liliana." He didn't look up from his tablet. "This is your home now, at least temporarily. You're welcome anywhere I am." I stepped inside, drawn despite myself to the books. My fingers traced the spines as I moved along the shelves, recognizing titles in Italian, English, Spanish, even some in what looked like Latin. "You've actually read all these?" "Most of them. The ones in Latin were my grandfather's. He believed a proper education required fluency in dead languages." He set down the tablet, giving me his full attention. "How are you settling in?" "I'm not." I turned to face him. "I'm existing in a very expensive cage while you decide what to do with me." "I'm not deciding what to do with you." His voice carried an edge. "I'm deciding what to do about Castellano. You're here because it's the safest place for you to be while I handle business you don't need to be involved in. Except I'm already involved." I moved closer, anger giving me courage. My inn is burned, my life is destroyed, and I'm surrounded by armed guards in a house that probably has more security than Fort Knox. I think I've earned the right to know exactly what's happening. He studied me for a long moment, then gestured to the chair across from his. "Sit." It wasn't a request, but I sat anyway, perching on the edge of the leather chair as though ready to flee at any moment. "Marco Castellano has controlled the Southern Territory for 15 years, Vittorio began, his voice taking on the clinical tone I'd heard in the car. "He's brutal, efficient, and has been expanding his operations into areas that traditionally belonged to other families, including mine. Your inn was supposed to be his foothold into Sunville, the beginning of a larger takeover of the coastal properties. And you stopped him by protecting my property. I stopped him by making it clear that Sunville falls under Salvatore protection, which made you a symbol, Liliana. No longer just a random innkeeper, but a representation of my authority in that region." He took a sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving mine. "Burning your inn was his way of saying that my protection means nothing, that he can strike at what I've claimed without consequences. So what happens now? You burn something of his? This just escalates until someone dies?" "Someone will die." His certainty made my blood run cold. The question is whether it's one person or many, whether it's contained or spirals into a full war between families. I'm trying to avoid the latter. By doing what? By offering Castellano a different target. He set down his glass with careful precision, Tomorrow, I'm meeting with the other family heads. A council, where grievances can be aired and solutions negotiated. I'm going to offer Castellano territory he's wanted for years, properties in the northern district that are more valuable than anything in Sunville, in exchange for him abandoning all claims to your inn and the surrounding area. You'd give up territory just to protect me? I'd give up territory to maintain peace and establish clear boundaries. Your protection is part of that negotiation, but it's not the only factor. He leaned forward, his intensity almost physical. You need to understand something, Liliana. In my world, everything is negotiation. Everything has a price. Even war has terms that can be met or avoided depending on what's offered. That's a very cold way to view human conflict. It's a realistic way to view it. He didn't sound offended, just matter of fact. Idealism is beautiful, little saint, but it doesn't prevent bloodshed. Practical negotiation does. I'm offering Castellano something he wants more than he wants revenge. If he's smart, he'll take it. And if he's not smart? Then I destroy him utterly and take everything he's built for myself, said with the same tone someone might use to discuss the weather. But I'm hoping it doesn't come to that for your sake. I stood, unable to sit still with the weight of what he was describing. You keep saying for my sake like my opinion matters, but you're making all these decisions without asking what I want. Because what you want is impossible. He rose as well, closing the distance between us in 2 strides. You want your old life back. You want this to have never happened. You want to return to a world where faith protects you, and evil stays conveniently distant. But that world never existed, Liliana. It was always an illusion, and I'm just the one who forced you to see the truth. I want to go home. My voice broke on the word. You are home. His hands came up to frame my face, the gesture achingly gentle despite the implacability of his words. This is the only home that's safe for you right now. And I know you hate that. Hate me for making it true. But hating reality doesn't change it. I don't hate you. The admission escaped before I could stop it. I should. Everything logical says I should, but I don't. Something shifted in his dark eyes, heat replacing the cold calculation. What do you feel then? Confused, angry, terrified. I forced myself to hold his gaze. And safe, which makes no sense because you're dangerous and your world is violent, and everything about this situation should make me feel the opposite of safe. But when you touch me like this, when you look at me like I matter, I feel safer than I've felt in months. You do matter. His thumb traced my cheekbone with devastating tenderness. More than you should. More than is wise for either of us. Why? I needed to understand. Why do I matter to you? You said you saw my photo months ago, that you became invested in protecting me. But that's not a complete answer. What about me specifically made you decide I was worth all this trouble? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, you were praying. What? In one of the surveillance photos. You just closed the inn for the night and you were standing on the front porch with your eyes closed, your hands clasped around that cross you always wear. The photographer caught you mid-prayer, completely unaware you were being watched. His hand slid down to my shoulders, anchoring me. And I looked at that photo and saw something I'd forgotten existed. Pure faith. Genuine belief that someone or something was listening and cared enough to respond. It was so foreign to my world that I couldn't look away. So, I'm what? A curiosity? A glimpse into a life you can't have? You're a reminder that not everyone is corrupt. His voice dropped lower. That goodness exists even when it's impractical. That some people choose light even when darkness would be easier. And yes, Liliana, that makes you valuable to me in ways that have nothing to do with strategy or territory, or any of the other factors that usually determine my decisions. I should have pulled away. Should have maintained distance. Remembered that this man was dangerous regardless of how gentle his touch. How honest his words. But I found myself leaning into his warmth instead, my hands coming to rest on his chest, where I could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong beneath my palms. "What happens after tomorrow's meeting?" I asked. "If Castellano accepts your offer, then you're free to return to Sunville, rebuild your inn, resume your life. And if he doesn't accept, then you stay here until the situation resolves itself." His arms came around me, pulling me fully against him in an embrace that felt more protective than romantic, however long that takes. I tilted my head back to look up at him, seeing the man beneath the Mafia boss for just a moment. Seeing someone who'd faced death and emerged changed, who'd built walls around his heart and was surprised to find them crumbling, who wanted to protect me even though it complicated everything in his carefully controlled world. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I know. But you're safe here, Liliana. I promise you that." And standing there in his arms, surrounded by luxury that felt like a prison and protection that felt like possession, I realized something terrifying. I believed him. Worse than that, I was starting to trust him. And worst of all, I was beginning to understand that the greatest danger I faced wasn't Marco Castellano, or federal investigations, or the violent world Vittorio inhabited. It was my own heart, which was betraying every logical instinct by recognizing in this dangerous man exactly what it had been searching for all along. Someone strong enough to stand between me and the darkness, even if he was part of that darkness himself. The morning of the council meeting, I woke to find Vittorio gone from the estate. Not just from the library where we'd talked late into the night, but completely absent from the house, according to Gabriella, who appeared at my door with breakfast and an expression that suggested she'd been ordered to keep me occupied. "He left at 4 a.m. for preliminary discussions," she explained, setting the tray on the small table by the window. "The formal council doesn't convene until this afternoon, but there's groundwork to be laid first. Politics." I picked at the fresh fruit and pastries she'd brought, my appetite non-existent. "How long have you worked for him?" 6 years. She poured coffee with practiced efficiency, since shortly after his grandfather died and he took full control of the family operations. "And you've never questioned what he does? The violence, the illegality of it all?" Gabriella's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. "Mr. Salvatore saved my life, Miss Flores. My husband was killed by a rival family, left me with 2 daughters to raise and debts I couldn't possibly pay. I was 3 days from being evicted when Vittorio showed up, paid off everything I owed, and offered me a job with salary and benefits that let me give my girls a real future. So no, I don't question what he does. I know what he did for me." The loyalty in her voice was absolute, and I found myself understanding it. Vittorio inspired that kind of devotion, not through fear, but through action. He saw people's needs and met them, creating bonds stronger than any contract or threat could forge. "Your daughters," I asked, curious. "Are they safe? Does working for him put them at risk?" "They're at university, full scholarships arranged by Mr. Salvatore. They know their mother works for a powerful man, but they don't know details they don't need to know." She met my gaze directly. "He protects his own, Miss Flores. Always. That includes the families of those who work for him." After Gabriella left, I wandered the gardens, trailed at a discreet distance by 2 security guards who pretended not to be watching my every move. The grounds were beautiful in the morning light, meticulously maintained with paths that wound through rose gardens and hedge mazes, and a small pond where koi fish swam in lazy circles. I found myself at a stone bench overlooking the pond, pulling out the rosary beads I'd carried in my pocket since leaving the inn. The familiar rhythm of prayer should have brought comfort, but instead I felt disconnected, as though the words were reaching nowhere. Or perhaps I was the one who'd moved too far from where they could reach me. "Pretty things for a pretty lady." The voice came from behind me, unfamiliar and carrying an accent I couldn't quite place. I turned to find a man I'd never seen before, tall and impeccably dressed, watching me with eyes that assessed and calculated. "You must be Liliana Flores. I'm Antonio Russo, a colleague of Vittorio's." Colleague felt like a euphemism. I stood, instinctively stepping back, my fingers tightening around the rosary beads. "Does Vittorio know you're here?" "Not yet. I arrived early for this afternoon's council. Thought I'd take a walk in these magnificent gardens." He moved closer, and I noticed the guards who'd been following me had disappeared, and found something far more interesting than flowers. "I think you should leave." I looked around for the security I'd been so annoyed by minutes ago, now desperately wishing for their presence. "Relax, Miss Flores. I mean you no harm. I'm simply curious about the woman who's caused such upheaval in our carefully balanced world." He tilted his head, studying me like I was an interesting specimen. "Vittorio Salvatore doesn't do sentiment, doesn't take risks for people outside the family. Yet here you are, the reason we're all gathering today to redraw territorial lines. What makes you so special?" I didn't ask for any of this. My voice came out stronger than I felt. Few of us ask for the roles we play. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Still, you must have something extraordinary to inspire such devotion from a man who usually treats people as chess pieces." "Antonio." Vittorio's voice cut through the garden like a blade. He appeared on the path behind Russo, flanked by two men I recognized from yesterday's escape. His expression was calm, but there was murder in his eyes. "I don't recall inviting you onto my private grounds before the council. Just admiring your gardens, Vittorio." Russo's tone remained pleasant, but he stepped away from me immediately. "And introducing myself to your charming guest." "My guest is not available for introductions." Vittorio moved to my side, his hand finding the small of my back in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. "And you'll remember that in the future." "Of course." Russo inclined his head in what might have been apology or mockery. "No disrespect intended. I'll see you this afternoon at the council." After he left, Vittorio's hand tightened on my back. "Did he touch you?" "No, he just talked." I turned to look up at him, seeing the barely controlled fury in his expression. "Your security disappeared. How did he get past them?" "Because he's not just a colleague, he's family. One of the few people granted automatic access to the grounds." He pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. "That privilege is being revoked effective immediately. No one approaches you without my explicit permission." "Vittorio, that's excessive. That's necessary." He pocketed the phone, his full attention on me now. "Antonio Russo is dangerous, Liliana. Charming, intelligent, and absolutely ruthless. He wanted to assess you, to understand what leverage you might represent, and I will not have him or anyone else using you as a pawn in their games." "But I am a pawn in your game." The words emerged before I could stop them. "That's what all this is, isn't it? Protecting me to prove a point to Castellano and everyone else about Salvatore power and reach." His expression darkened. "Is that what you think? That you're just strategy?" I don't know what to think anymore. Exhaustion made me honest. "Yesterday you said I matter to you, but today I'm a bargaining chip at some council meeting. Which is it, Vittorio? Am I a person to you or a chess piece?" He pulled me closer, his hands framing my face with that gentle intensity that never failed to make my breath catch. "You're everything, Liliana. You're the reason I'm risking alliances I spent years building. The reason I'm offering concessions I'd normally never consider. The reason I'm standing in my garden at 10 a.m. instead of preparing for the most important negotiation of my career. Does that sound like a chess piece to you?" "It sounds like obsession." "Yes." No denial, just raw honesty. "It's absolutely obsession. I'm obsessed with keeping you safe, with making sure no one hurts you, with having you close enough that I can protect you from every threat, including threats you don't even know exist yet." and I'm not sorry for it. You should be. But my hands had moved to his chest, fingers curling into his shirt. This isn't healthy, Vittorio, for either of us. Probably not. His thumb traced my lower lip, the touch sending electricity through my entire body. But it's honest. And after a lifetime of lies and manipulation and using people as tools, honest obsession feels almost pure. I should have argued. Should have pushed him away, demanded he take me back to Sunville immediately, consequences be damned. Instead, I found myself rising on my toes, closing the distance between us, my lips finding his in a kiss that tasted of desperation and surrender, and something that terrified me more than any threat Castellano could pose. Vittorio responded immediately, one hand tangling in my hair while the other pulled me flush against him. The kiss deepened, became something claiming and possessive, and absolutely consuming. I forgot about councils and negotiations, and the violent world surrounding us. There was only this, only him, only the way he made me feel simultaneously protected and desired in ways I'd never experienced. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. I have to leave in an hour for the council. I'll be gone most of the afternoon, possibly into the evening. I know. My hands had somehow found their way under his shirt, resting against the warm skin of his back. While I'm gone, you stay on the grounds. No exceptions. Gabriella will be with you the entire time, and security has been tripled. His voice was firm, allowing no argument. Antonio's appearance this morning is a reminder that not everyone at today's council has benign intentions. Some would love to use you to weaken my position. How would taking me weaken you? By proving I have something I care about more than power. He pulled back enough to look into my eyes. Caring is weakness in my world, Liliana. It creates vulnerabilities that enemies exploit. Which is why I've spent my entire adult life never caring about anyone or anything except maintaining control. Until now. Until you. He kissed me again, softer this time, almost reverent. Which makes you both my greatest strength and my most dangerous weakness. That's a lot of pressure. You can handle it. His smile was brief but genuine. You're stronger than you think, little saint. You've survived everything thrown at you these past days without breaking. That's not weakness. That's steel wrapped in grace. After he left, I returned to my room and did something I hadn't done since arriving at the estate. I locked myself in the bathroom, ran the water to create noise, and pulled out my cell phone. The one I'd thrown in my duffel bag at the last minute. The one I'd kept turned off because I assumed Vittorio would be monitoring communications. It powered up slowly, immediately showing 15 missed calls. All from the same number, a number I recognized as belonging to Father Miguel, my priest from Sunville. With trembling hands, I called him back. Liliana. His voice was thick with relief. Thank God. Are you safe? The inn. I saw the fire on the news, and no one could tell me where you were. I'm safe, Father. I'm staying with someone who's protecting me. The truth, if not the complete truth. The police say it was gang violence, that rival criminal organizations were fighting over your property. Is that true? Yes. No point in lying to a priest. I got caught in the middle of something I didn't understand, but I'm safe now. Where are you, child? I can come get you, bring you to the church. We have resources for people in your situation. I almost laughed at the idea of Father Miguel showing up at Salvatore House to rescue me from a Mafia boss. I can't, Father. It's complicated, but I need you to know I'm okay, and I'm making my own choices. Choices made under duress aren't truly free choices, Liliana. I know. I closed my eyes, fighting tears. But they're the only choices I have right now. Please, just pray for me. That's all I'm asking. I pray for you every day. His voice softened. But prayer isn't a substitute for action when someone needs help. I'm not asking for help, Father. I'm asking for faith that I'll find my way through this. After we hung up, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me wore expensive clothes she hadn't chosen, stood in a luxury bathroom in a house owned by a criminal, and had just kissed that criminal with more passion than she'd ever felt for her ex-fiancé. When had I become this person? Or had this person always existed beneath the surface, waiting for someone like Vittorio to pull her into the light? The afternoon stretched endlessly. Gabriella kept me occupied with a tour of the house's prohibited areas now that I had explicit permission, showing me rooms that ranged from a private gym to a home theater to what could only be described as an armory. The casual display of weapons should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself fascinated by the precision with which everything was organized and maintained. "He's very methodical," Gabriella said, noticing my interest. "Everything in its place, every contingency planned for. It's how he survived this long in a world designed to consume people like him." "Do you ever worry he'll be killed?" The question emerged before I could stop it. Every day. Her honesty was stark. But I also know he's smarter and more careful than most. He doesn't take unnecessary risks, doesn't let emotion cloud judgment. Or he didn't, until recently. Until me. She nodded. Until you. Which worries me, Miss Flores. Not because I think you're bad for him, but because caring makes him vulnerable in ways he hasn't been before. I don't want him to be vulnerable because of me. Too late. Her smile was sad. The moment he decided you mattered, his vulnerability was established. The question now is whether you'll be worth the risk he's taking. Her words haunted me through the afternoon, through dinner I ate alone in that cavernous dining room, through the long evening spent waiting for Vittorio to return. By midnight, I'd given up and gone to bed, falling into fitful sleep where I dreamed of fire and violence and dark eyes that promised protection I wasn't sure I wanted to accept. I woke to hands on my shoulders, gentle but insistent, and Vittorio's voice cutting through the fog of sleep. "Liliana, wake up. We need to talk." I sat up, disoriented, reaching for the lamp. He stopped me, his hand covering mine. "Leave it off. I need you to listen." The seriousness in his tone woke me faster than any light could have. "What happened? Did Castellano refuse the offer?" "Castellano's dead." The words hung in the darkness between us, too shocking to fully process. "What? How?" "Someone shot him during the council. 3 bullets, professional execution, right in front of 20 witnesses, including me." His voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the tension beneath. "And before he died, he said your name." My blood turned to ice. Why would he say my name? Because whoever killed him wanted to frame me for ordering his death, to make it look like I had him assassinated to avoid negotiation. Vittorio's hands found my face in the darkness, his touch anchoring me against rising panic. "Which means someone at that council knows about you, knows you matter to me, and is using that knowledge to start a war I've been desperately trying to avoid, but you didn't order it." "No. But try proving that when the victim's last word was the name of the woman under my protection." He exhaled slowly. "Liliana, this changes everything. Every family now believes I ordered a hit during sacred council. Castellano's people will demand blood. The other families will have to take sides. And you're at the center of all of it, whether you want to be or not. So what do we do?" His silence was answer enough. There was no clear path forward, no negotiation that would satisfy everyone, no way to prove innocence when all evidence pointed toward guilt. "We do what we must," he finally said. "We survive, together." And in the darkness of that expensive room in a house built on violence and power, I made a choice that changed everything. I took his hand and held on, accepting that there was no going back to who I'd been, no returning to a world where faith alone kept me safe, because the only safety I had now was in the arms of a man the entire criminal underworld believed was a murderer. And despite everything, despite logic and faith and every lesson I'd ever learned, I trusted him to protect me from the storm that was coming, even if he was the one who'd called it forth. The war came faster than anyone expected. By dawn, 3 Castellano properties had been firebombed in retaliation for what his family assumed was Vittorio's betrayal. By noon, 2 Salvatore warehouses were burning in response. The carefully maintained balance of power that had kept the city's underworld stable for 15 years shattered in less than 12 hours. And I was the reason why. "You need to eat something," Gabriella said, setting another untouched breakfast tray on the table in my room. I'd been confined here since Vittorio's revelation about Castellano's death, watched by rotating guards who stood just outside my door. Protection or imprisonment, the distinction had become meaningless. "I'm not hungry." I stood at the window, watching smoke rise from somewhere in the city. Another fire, another casualty in a war that bore my name, even though I'd never asked for it. "Mr. Salvatore won't be back until evening. He's meeting with the other family heads, trying to prevent this from escalating further." She hesitated, something almost like sympathy crossing her usually professional features. "He's fighting for you, Miss Flores. Harder than I've ever seen him fight for anything. People are dying because of me. People are dying because someone orchestrated a murder and used you as the weapon." She moved to stand beside me at the window. "Don't take responsibility for evil you didn't commit." But I felt responsible anyway. If I'd never helped Vittorio that first day, if I'd called the police despite his warnings, if I'd made any of a dozen different choices, maybe none of this would be happening. Maybe Castellano would still be alive. Maybe the city wouldn't be burning. Maybe I'd still be the woman who believed faith was enough to keep darkness at bay. The door opened without a knock, and Vittorio entered looking like he'd aged a decade in the past 24 hours. His suit was rumpled. Shadows under his eyes spoke of no sleep, and there was a hardness to his expression I hadn't seen before. This was the Mafia boss stripped of all pretense, showing the violence and exhaustion that came with maintaining power through fear. "Leave us," he said to Gabriella, who departed without question. I turned to face him, my hands clasped tightly to stop their trembling. "How bad is it?" 7 dead, 12 injured, property damage in the millions. He poured himself whiskey from the decanter on my dresser, downing it in one swallow. "And it's only going to get worse unless I can prove I didn't order Castellano's death." "Can you prove it?" "I'm working on it." He poured another drink, but didn't drink it immediately. "The problem is that everyone at that council had motive to want Castellano dead. He'd made enemies through years of brutal expansion. But I'm the only one with a clear connection to you, which makes me the obvious suspect. Unless someone else knew about me." I remembered Antonio Russo in the garden, his calculating assessment, his interest in what made me special to Vittorio. Antonio. He approached me the morning of the council. He was asking questions about why you cared so much. Vittorio went very still. What exactly did he say? I recounted the conversation as precisely as I could remember, watching his expression darken with each word. When I finished, he was already pulling out his phone, typing rapidly. Antonio Russo has been positioning himself to take over Castellano's territory for months. If Castellano was dead and I was blamed, Antonio would be perfectly placed to absorb everything in the chaos. His fingers flew across the screen. And using you as the trigger was brilliant. It made my motive personal rather than strategic, made me look like I'd broken sacred rules for a woman. So what do? We prove it. He looked up from his phone, and I saw determination replacing exhaustion. I have people pulling surveillance from the council building, tracking Antonio's movements, following his money. If he ordered the hit, there will be evidence. There's always evidence. And until then? Until then, You stay here where it's safe." He crossed to me, his hands finding my shoulders. "Liliana, I need you to understand something. This is about to get very ugly. Antonio won't go down without a fight. And if he realizes I'm on to him, he might try to use you as leverage. I can handle it. I know you can." His smile was brief but genuine. "You're stronger than you think, little saint. But I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If something happens to me, if this goes wrong, there's a plan in place. Gabriella has instructions, money, documents, everything you need to disappear completely. New identity, new life. Far from all of this." His hands tightened on my shoulders. "Promise me you'll use it. Promise me you won't try to stay or fight or be loyal to my memory. Just run and don't look back. Vittorio, promise me." His intensity was almost painful. "I can face anything as long as I know you'll survive it." "I promise." The words felt like betrayal even as I spoke them. He kissed me then, hard and desperate, pouring everything he couldn't say into the contact. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I'm going to fix this," he said. "I'm going to prove Antonio ordered that hit. I'm going to end this war, and then I'm going to give you a choice." "What choice?" "Whether to stay in my world or return to yours." He pulled back enough to look into my eyes. "No pressure, no manipulation, no making you feel obligated because I protected you. Just an honest choice about what kind of life you want. And if I choose to leave, then I let you go with my blessing and enough money to rebuild your inn 10 times over." His voice was steady, despite the pain I saw in his eyes. "And I'll spend the rest of my life grateful I got to know you, even briefly. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life." Vittorio was gone more than he was present, coordinating with his people, meeting with the other families, slowly building the case against Antonio. I occupied myself with prayer and pacing, wearing a path in the expensive carpet of my room, while Gabriella provided updates that were simultaneously reassuring and terrifying. "They found the payment," she told me on the second evening. Antonio wired $2 million to an offshore account belonging to the shooter. The transaction was hidden, but Mr. Salvatore's people are very good at finding hidden things. Is that enough to prove it? Combined with security footage showing Antonio meeting with the shooter 3 days before the council. Yes. She smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her. It's enough. The final confrontation happened at another council, this one called specifically to address Antonio's betrayal. I wasn't allowed to attend, but Gabriella gave me a minute-by-minute account as information came through. Antonio tried to deny it at first. Then he tried to justify it. Said Castellano needed to be eliminated for the good of all the families. When that didn't work, he tried to run. Her expression was grim. He didn't make it to the door. Is he dead? Yes. The other family heads voted unanimously. Betrayal during sacred council carries only one penalty. She squeezed my hand gently. It's over, Miss Flores. The war is over. Vittorio returned just after midnight, looking exhausted but lighter somehow, as though a weight had been lifted. He found me in the library where I'd been pretending to read, and simply pulled me into his arms without speaking. We stood like that for a long time, his heartbeat steady against my ear, my arms wrapped around his waist. When he finally pulled back, there were tears in his eyes I pretended not to see. It's done, he said simply. Antonio's dead. The other families have accepted that I wasn't responsible for Castellano's death, and reparations have been negotiated for the damage done during the brief war. So I can go home. Yes. The word seemed to cost him something. Your inn is being rebuilt as we speak. I took the liberty of hiring the best contractors, using the original blueprints but with modern safety features. It should be ready in 3 months. You didn't have to do that. I destroyed your life, Liliana. Rebuilding your home is the least I can do." He moved to the window, his back to me. "I also established a trust fund in your name. Enough money that you'll never have to worry about finances again. Never have to be vulnerable to people like Castellano who see opportunity in others' desperation." "Vittorio. And I've arranged for permanent security. Discreet, you won't even notice them, but they'll be there if you ever need protection." He turned to face me, his expression carefully neutral. "Everything is in place for you to return to the life you had before I walked through your door. Except I can't return to that life." I stood, moving toward him. "Because I'm not the same person I was 2 weeks ago. That Liliana believed the world was fundamentally good, that faith would protect her, that she could live safely if she just stayed quiet and invisible. But I'm not her anymore." "Then who are you?" "I don't know yet." I reached for his hand, lacing our fingers together. "But I know I can't figure it out by pretending the past 2 weeks never happened. I can't go back to my inn and serve breakfast to tourists and pray away everything I've learned about the world and about myself." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I need time. Time to understand what I want, who I want to be, whether the woman I'm becoming can exist in your world, or if she needs to build something entirely new." I squeezed his hand. "But I'm not saying goodbye. Not yet. Not until I'm sure." Hope flickered in his dark eyes. "How much time do you need?" "I don't know. Weeks, maybe months. Can you give me that? Can you let me figure this out without pressure or expectations?" "I can give you anything you need, little saint." He pulled me closer, his free hand coming up to cup my face. "Take all the time you want. I'll be here when you're ready, whether that's tomorrow or next year or never. And if I decide I can't live in your world, if I choose to return to Sunville and rebuild my old life, then I'll miss you every day for the rest of mine." His smile was sad, but genuine. "But I'll respect your choice, because that's what you do when you love someone. You let them choose their own path, even when it leads away from you." "You love me?" Desperately, completely, irrationally. No hesitation, just raw honesty. "I've loved you since I saw you praying in that surveillance photo, loved you more when you helped me despite knowing it was dangerous, and I'll love you for the rest of my life regardless of what you decide." I kissed him then, pouring everything I felt but couldn't yet name into the contact. Fear and gratitude and desire, and something that might become love given enough time and certainty. When we broke apart, I knew what I needed to do. "I'm going to stay," I said. "Not here at the estate, but in the city. I'll get an apartment, find work, build a life that's mine, and you'll give me space to do that without interference. No guards unless I ask for them. No solving my problems before I know they exist. No making decisions for me." "Agreed. And when I'm ready, when I've figured out who I am outside of being a victim or a protected asset or a symbol of your power, I'll come find you. And we'll see if what we feel for each other can exist without all the drama and danger forcing us together. And if it can't." His voice was carefully neutral, but I saw the fear in his eyes. "Then at least we'll know the truth." I touched his face, feeling the slight stubble along his jaw. "But Vittorio, I think it can. I think underneath all the chaos and violence and impossible circumstances, there's something real between us, something worth fighting for. I know there is." He turned his head to press a kiss to my palm. "And I'll wait as long as it takes for you to know it too." 3 months later, I stood in front of my rebuilt inn, keys in hand, looking at the restored facade that was somehow both familiar and new. Vittorio had been true to his word, keeping his distance while I found my footing in a new apartment, a new job at a legal aid clinic helping people navigate systems designed to defeat them. I'd found purpose in advocacy, strength in independence, and clarity about what I wanted. I pulled out my phone and called the number I'd memorized but never deleted. He answered on the first ring. Liliana. I'm ready, I said simply. If the offer still stands. It stands. It will always stand. I could hear the smile in his voice. Where are you? Home, at the inn. Can you come here? I'll be there in 2 hours. He made it in 90 minutes, pulling up in a different car than I remembered, dressed more casually than I'd ever seen him. He stood on my porch, this dangerous man who'd turned my world upside down, and waited for me to invite him in. Welcome to the Seaside Haven Inn, I said, opening the door wide. No bombs, no violence, no drama allowed. Just Faith and Jasmine and the woman who finally figured out she could choose both light and the man who stands between her and the darkness. That's all I've ever wanted. He stepped inside, his hand finding mine. To stand between you and anything that might hurt you. I know. And I finally understand that accepting your protection doesn't make me weak. It makes me strong enough to choose love even when it's complicated and dangerous, and nothing like I planned. You love me? His voice held wonder. Desperately, completely, irrationally. I echoed his words from months ago. And I choose you, Vittorio Salvatore. Choose us. Choose this impossible, beautiful, terrifying thing we've built from chaos and faith and the stubborn refusal to let darkness win. He kissed me then, there in the lobby of my rebuilt inn, and it tasted like coming home and starting over, and every promise we'd make to each other in the years to come. Because some loves don't ask permission. They arrive like storms, destroy everything familiar, and force you to rebuild stronger than before. And if you're very lucky, you realize the storm didn't come to destroy you. It came to show you what you were always